So new Hackfest. How's everyone doing this morning? Good. Okay, I'm going to talk about web pen testing, specifically with Burp and some Burp extensions that I put together called CO2. First, a little bit about myself. I am a senior security consultant with a company called Secure Ideas. We're based out of Florida. I actually live in the Charlotte area, so I've come a long way to Hackfest. First time in Quebec City. It's a nice city so far. Really enjoy hacking things. I used to be a software developer and architect, but I found that breaking things was more fun than building things, so now I do a lot of breaking. Other things that I do, open source contributor for a number of open source projects. And I'm a runner, a musician. I play the piano, I play a little bit of bass. And very important and relevant to this talk, I'm a home brewer. Are there any other home brewers in the room? Yeah, all right, there's quite a few of you actually. So I make beer. It's fantastic. Okay, so web penetration testing. Why is this important? Well, Francois just finished a talk on defending against web attacks. They're still one of the primary targets. This is the main form of interface that users have with the internet and the network. So we put everything out there on the web. We have our online banking. We have all of our social networking is on there. We have email. Internally, you're looking at collaboration, document management. All kinds of things are available through web browsers. And a lot of these still have vulnerabilities. On this slide, I put the OWASP top 10 as an example of a lot of the types of things that we still find in web applications. By the way, how many web pen testers do we have in the room? Are there people? Okay, good. And just pen testers who are just starting into web, maybe other things? Okay, there's a few of you as well. Cool. So if you're getting into web pen testing, maybe you're new to web pen testing, maybe you've been doing a lot of like network infrastructure pen testing and you're starting into web. These are some of the main tactics, skill sets that you absolutely must acquire. These are essential skills for a web pen tester, things that you need to know how to do. You need to know how to map out a web application and understand how it works. And then you need to be able to search over those results. You need to understand how to take a web request and then reissue that request and check the different responses that you get when you manipulate the input values, the parameters, cookies, so on and so forth. You need to understand fuzzing. So I'm going to talk about, more about fuzzing. I actually have a number of demonstrations in the second half of this talk, so we'll be actually looking at how fuzzing is done inside of Burp. And automated scanning. It's important to know when and how to do automated scanning as well. A lot of what we do is manual, but it's supplemented with the automated scanning, so it's an important aspect to have as well. So how are we going to do all of these things? How are we going to leverage these skills? The primary tool that every web pen tester has in their back pocket is an intercepting proxy. Intercepting proxy kind of maps to these things. First of all, it records all of your request and response traffic. That's pretty important. That is usually searchable. You can man in the middle your requests. So send a request, make some changes, send it again, check and see what the difference is in the results. You can run things through a fuzzer. We're going to be doing some of that. Most of them also do automated scans. There's basically two main intercepting proxies out there that are widely in use right now. Portswigger Burp is the one that I'm going to be talking about here, and that's mainly because Secure Ideas is what we standardized on. And that's also what I've built my CO2 extensions on. The other one, so if you're looking for a non-commercial product, is Z-Attack Proxy, or ZAP, the OWASP version. So that one's free, which is good. We like free. So Burp, like I said, is Portswigger is the name of the company. I didn't name it, and it's kind of weird. It's Java-based. It has some of the best spidering capability, has, I think, the best fuzzing solution out there for an intercepting proxy. It also does a whole lot of other things. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I could talk about Burp and web app pen testing probably for about 3 or 4 days straight, so we don't have enough time for that. So Burp basically, like I said, intercepting proxy, and it does a bunch of other things. So everybody kind of gets Burp. You're probably wondering where the name CO2 came from. So CO2, I told you homebrewing was going to come into this. So it is a byproduct of fermentation. So you put sugar in, you get CO2 and alcohol, which is good. Okay, a simplified version, it makes things fuzzy, fizzy, bubbly, and this is kind of where the burp comes in. So, you drink, you get the bubbles, burp. Okay, anyway. So, what is it really? Like I said, I used to be a software developer. One thing I found that was more fun than, possibly more fun than breaking things, was building tools to break things. So that's why I started working on this. I actually have found that during certain pen tests, Burp by itself didn't have all of the capabilities that I needed. There were some things that I wanted to be able to do. And I'm a lazy person. I will spend hours automating something just to save 10 minutes. So I don't know if there's anybody else in the room that does that. So it's pretty awesome. I'm a little biased, but I enjoy doing it. So Burp extensions, if this is something that you're interested in, do we have any developers in the room? We must have a few. Quite a few, lots of developers. So if you're interested in writing extensions on Burp, there's a variety of languages available that it supports. Burp itself, like I said, is a Java-based tool, but it also supports extensions written in Python and Ruby. I don't like Ruby. I don't know anybody who really likes Ruby, actually. So, but one caveat is if you are writing in Ruby or Python, because the Burp itself is written in Java, there are sometimes some issues with resource utilization, especially if you're loading multiple extensions at the same time. So that's just something to be aware of. There are quite a few extensions written in Python and Ruby just the same, especially in Python. So the API itself, what can you do with an extension? Well, remember that slide I showed that had all of those different tabs on there, all the different things you could do in Burp? You can interact with a lot of what's there. You can issue requests. You can add things to the list of findings within Burp. You can create custom payload generators. So if you have special needs, or if the web application that you're attacking is very specific in nature, and the regular tools don't work, then you can actually write yourself a payload generator to do that. The API itself is pretty easy to find. You just look under the Extender tab inside of Burp, click on the APIs tab, and then you can, down in the bottom, you can download the interfaces and the Java docs for that. Writing the extensions itself. So I know it's probably a lot of people, if you're a Java developer, you're probably familiar with Eclipse. Hopefully some of you have also used IntelliJ. This is what Portswigger uses. So IntelliJ IDEA is what I would recommend if you're writing Burp extensions. It just seems to flow very easily in there, and building the interface itself, because it has a drag and drop user interface, builder, it makes it really easy to build a configuration screen for your plugin. So that's what I do. So basically, all you need to do is you take your Burp API itself, which is in a package of Burp. You're going to write yourself a Burp extender, write your code inside of there, build your cool configuration screen, jar this all up. So you just put it into a jar, and then you can load it directly into Extender tab inside of Burp. Once you have your extension working the way you want, then you can actually get in touch with Portswigger, and they'll load it onto the BAP store, is what they call it now. So, and the BAP store actually shows up as a tab inside of the extender inside of Burp. So you can download a lot of extensions directly in there for additional functionality. Okay, how about some demonstrations of some of this extender functionality? Before I actually sit down to do the demonstration, I just want to do a quick plug here on Samurai Web Testing Framework. If you are getting into web testing, this is worth taking a look at. It's a free distribution. It's basically a live Linux distro that includes targets. A lot of the tools are already built in there for you. We use it a lot when we're teaching web pen testing classes. So the reason why I'm going to use it here is it's a safe environment because I need some targets to show you things that I'm attacking. It's a safe environment. It's already built. It has targets in it, and I think it's pretty awesome. Project URLs, if you're looking for Samurai, you can just Google it. It's the easiest thing to do, Samurai Web Testing Framework. Okay, so let's take a look. So actually, while I'm talking about Samurai, just very quickly, if you bring up the Samurai environment, which you'll run inside of a VM, so you can just get VMware going, or VirtualBox. It should work on VirtualBox as well. Then just under Applications, there's the Samurai menu, and you'll see that there's a menu structure there of tools that's based on the methodology, and then there's also a set of targets over here as well that are already pre-installed on there. So this is kind of sort of like the backtrack of web pen testing. If you're familiar with that. All right, so Burp, which I wish there was a way to make this a little bigger on the screen. Okay, so for those of you not familiar with Burp, intercepting proxy, the first tab on there, the target tab, we're going to see a sitemap be constructed on there. We also have under the proxy tab, our HTTP history will show up there. There's also Spider, the scanner, that's where the automated scanner is. The scanner, by the way, is not available on the free. There's a free version of Burp that doesn't have certain capabilities on there. So it's good enough for evaluating, but it doesn't actually have enough functionality to perform a real pen test in there. A lot of it's been disabled. Repeater is for reissuing a request. Remember, I mentioned that as an essential skill, so that's a tool that you'll want to play with. Sequencer is for doing, if you have to test the randomness of a particular, like a token, for example, session tokens, and you'll use Sequencer to do that. And Intruder is our fuzzing tool, and I'm going to be showing that in a moment. And here's the extender tab. Okay, so I only have one extension loaded. It's CO2. It actually, CO2 creates its own tab of additional tools right here. Okay. So, and hang on, I need my cheat sheet. I know which tool to test where. So, Okay, so let's first of all, what we'll do is bring up an application. So one of the applications that we have is the Samurai Dojo Basic, and this is the main application we use when we're teaching web pen testing. It's a very broken application. Most, if not all, of the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities exist inside this application. So it makes it a good one for demonstration purposes. And you can see actually now that I've visited the application, our Burp has started to populate some of the content on there. So one thing about this application, so let's just do some testing using the SQL mapper. I'm going to just submit a request with any information, it doesn't really matter what. And I'll go into the proxy history. I could also go into the target tab. So anywhere inside of Burp that you can find a request, you right-click, you get a context menu, and you can send that to various different tools. And I've linked CO2 to that. So I have, in this case here, I'm sending it to the SQL mapper. We're going to try SQL map on the login form. And this is a SQL map tool. Now, so far we don't have it actually interacting with SQL map proper, but the really cool thing that it does is it provides an interface for all of the options inside of SQL map. If anybody's used SQL, I'm sure some of you have used SQL map. Yeah, it's the help on SQL map. Let's take a look at the help on SQL map here. Oops, hang on. Okay, so it's several pages of help, and if you're unfamiliar with exactly what it is you need to do, it could take you a long time to figure out what you need to type in. In addition, there's a large chance for human error because if you have cookies, for example, let's say I had cookie values on here, and I wanted to include that. If you have cookies, if you have post data, it ends up being an exercise in copy and paste back and forth between multiple windows because SQL map is a command line tool, right? And then you have Burp. So I decided to save myself some effort, and so what we do now is just send your request over there, and then you can copy all of that over to your command line. Still have to type SQL map though. But then just paste, copy, paste, and everything's good to go, and it should just start doing its testing. Okay. And I will probably actually cancel that so it doesn't. Actually, that's good enough. Okay. So once we have gone through, we've done our initial discovery. SQL map, in case you missed it, SQL map actually found that the login form is vulnerable to SQL injection in this application. So what you can do then is go through the enumeration section on here and add, in this case here, we'll enumerate the databases, for example. I know it doesn't save a whole lot in this case, but okay, so it's gone through and it's enumerated the databases. Okay. So those are, if you haven't used SQL map before and you're doing this kind of testing, that's a completely separate topic, but it's a very, very cool tool for SQL injection, discovery, and exploitation. So, all right. The next thing that I'd like to show on another part of CO2 is something called the name mangler. And I tried to end most of my tools with an ER because if you notice, that's what Portswigger guys did with burp tools. They had, these spider, scanner, intruder, sequencer. So I created the SQL mapper, generator, mangler, cooler. So the name mangler. So name mangler, the way that works is, let's say you don't understand or you don't know what a particular login format is, but you do know some of the users that you're attacking. So let's see here. Actually, before I do this, let me find a vulnerability first. So BWAP is another target that's installed on Samurai. It's another buggy application. And we'll do forgotten password function. That'll work. Okay, so let's say we found some part of our authentication is vulnerable to username harvesting. So what we'll do is I'll just use an email address on there. Okay, so it says invalid user. So what we'll do is we want to find what are some valid users. Okay. So given that we know that a couple of people who may have logged into this previously, what we can do is press this mangle names, and it'll create a whole list of usernames, potential usernames. It'll try first name, last name, first initial, last name, so on and so forth. So it kind of gives you this list of possibilities. By mixing all these up. There are some additional options on here too for if you have a case-sensitive login. If you want to include numeric suffixes, sometimes you want years on there, depends. Those are some common things that people will put on there. And then there's also a set of, you can specify a set of different delimiters to use between the first and last parts of it. So once you have what you want, what we'll do now is actually go down to here. I'm going to take this request, and what we're going to do is we're going to fuzz the request. Okay, so we're going to resubmit that request several times using the list I just generated of usernames and see if we can figure out what is a valid username. So we're going to send this request to intruder. And this is the fuzzing tool inside of Burp. So the first thing that you'll do inside of this tool is go to your positions tab, and it will, by default, it'll set a bunch of payload positions on there. So those are the things that you want to fuzz. Usually you end up having to clear that out because it's too aggressive for what we're doing. And in my case, I just want to change the very first part of the, because I'm using an email address in this particular case. So I just want to replace the word Jason with other things. Right? So to do that, we just select the payload position for Jason. And then under the payloads, I'm going to paste in my list. Just going to use that simple list that I just generated. And then I start attack. Okay. And it will go through. It's going to try. It's done all of these requests. It's already done. By the way, the free version of Burp has this tool in there, but it's extremely crippled, so it goes very, very slowly. Makes it unusable for tests. This is the pro version. It's a lot faster. So what we'll do is once you've gone through, you want to look for things that are different. So what I've done is I've just sorted by the length, and I noticed that there's a couple of values that have different lengths than everything else. So those would be the two that we want to try. So one is Jay Gillam and the other one's Kevin. So if I do, I've done this before. Okay. So, or if I do Kevin. Okay, so both of those actually worked. So, all right, let's take a look at the next couple of things on here. User generator. So the user generator, what this was a need to create lists of possible usernames for logging into things. Sometimes you run into a web application where you have no idea who the users are for it. So you want to start off with something. So what I did here is I actually used statistical data to generate the list. So it starts off, at the top of the list are the most common names, and the bottom of the list are the least common names. And the way I did that is I took, this is based on United States names right now. So the first names are statistically most common baby names from the years 1920 all the way through till 2000. So you can actually, I have a scale on here, and depending on your target, you can actually slide it to, if it's retirees, for example, you might use earlier birthday range. If it's students, then you might use a later one, and that'll give you more accurate output from that. And then for the surnames, I used census data. So the most recent census data on surnames. And so putting those together, you can use, this case here, I'll just use the defaults, which is to just do the first initial and the last name. You just hit add combos, and you get this massive output list of usernames that you can then use in the similar tool that we just did before in Intruder. Right? The first one on the list is J. Smith, so if you're wondering what the most common combination would be. So that's sometimes useful. Okay, the next tool we'll take a quick look at is Cooler. So is anybody familiar with DigiNinja's Cool tool? No? Custom word list generator? I don't know where the E comes from. Okay, so Cool is a tool that's been around for a very long time. I think it's Python-based, but it might be Perl. And what it does is you point it at a website, and it extracts all of the words from the website and creates a word list out of those. And the reason why we use that is because sometimes people will actually use words on their own website as their password. It'd be something about the website, some piece of information that they like to use as a password. It's not a very strong password, but that's what we're looking for when we're doing a pen test, right? We're looking for the low-hanging fruit. So I decided this is one of those things, I, again, didn't like going out into another tool, generating a list, bringing the list in here. So I actually had a conversation with Robin Wood, DigiNinja, and asked him, hey, do you mind if I bring your tool into Burp? And he was like, yeah, that sounds cool. So, so he helped me out a little bit with it. So the way this works is if we take some of the pages that we've already browsed, so I'm going to take some of the pages from Dojo Basic. You can send those over to Cooler. So instead of spidering everything all over again, what Cooler does is it takes the requests that you've already gathered in your history, and then it just parses those out and extracts the words. So it goes really fast. Right, so we have another list. There's several options on here, minimum, maximum sizes of words. So we can, but let's see if there's a way we can try this. Something we can do. So let's see. Actually, let's try. Let's try logging in again. So again, I'm going to go down to my proxy history, take that last request, that's the most recent one, and send that over to Intruder. Go to my payload positions. This time, I have a known username. I'll tell you that Jason is a valid username in here. And on the password, I'm going to set that as the payload position. And then I'm going to go into my payloads, and I'm going to paste that list from cool. And then we'll start that attack. It goes pretty fast. There's only 130 of them. And again, we're looking for differences. So we look for, it has the status changed, it hasn't, has the length of anything changed. In this case, it hasn't. So we haven't found our password yet. So what do? We need another tool, right? I'm full of tools. So what I decided to do in this tool here is, given a word list, I'll go ahead and paste ours in. Given a word list that you've obtained from somewhere of common words, are there things that we can do to change the words in that word list to make them basically modify them in ways to potentially come up with the password? So this is a password brute forcing tool, which is kind of cool. Things that it'll do, this middle section here, I know it's hard to see on the screen, but this middle section here is basically what you're defining as a password specification. So if you've been logging into a site and maybe you registered for an account on it, and you realize that you know what the minimum and maximum length requirements are for the password, you know that it requires an uppercase, a lowercase, a number, special symbols, so on and so forth. You put all of that into this specification. And what Mangler will do is it'll take your word list and it'll use those words to generate new words that actually conform to that list. So it will do things like add numerical suffixes. It will put two words together from that list to make longer words. It will, it will do leet substitutions. So you're familiar with leet speak? It'll actually do some of those inside of the words and try some of those words. So rather than generating this, because you can imagine this could end up being a very long list. What I did is I have the ability to create a payload generator here. So we'll go ahead and actually I'm going to say in this case here we want at least one alpha, uppercase, lowercase, one numeric, and at least one special character. So we'll get some interesting results. We'll go ahead and create that. Then we're going to go over to, actually we can use the same, we're still going to try to crack the same password. So we're going to use the same target and intruder here, only this time we're changing the payload type to extension generated. It's near the bottom of the list. And we will use the CO2 masher generator. Okay. And I'll start that attack. I'll let that run for a little while. And it's basically, it's taking the various different words from our word list now. It's been combining them, making adjustments, adding symbols to the end. It starts off with some of the more common ones. So exclamation point is what it's going to start with in terms of symbols. And I'll just stop it right here. Okay. So once it's gone through, I stopped it prematurely because I know where it's, it could go on for a long time if I don't. So it found on try number 865, the password is actually password, but it has a capital P. Instead of the letter A, it's substituted the number 4, and it ends in an exclamation point. So that's a stronger password than just password by itself, and it actually conforms to the password specification that we said. So I'll type that in there and we can see it in action. Okay, so Hackfest is awesome. All right. Take a look at a couple of other tools right quick. I have 2 more. So the first one, this is just right click. If you're ever doing a web pen test and you run across basic auth, a basic authentication, where it brings a little pop-up on there, those usually there's no lockout mechanism at all on them, which makes them kind of fun to attack, but trying to get the payload right to put it in there using the default tools is sometimes tricky. So what I've done here is you have a box for usernames that you want to try, you have another one for passwords, and you just generate your these 64 encoded payloads. It just puts them together so that you actually have basic auth payloads. So I won't do a demonstration on using that right now. Now this last tool, Laudanum. So Laudanum has actually been around for a while. What it is, if you do web pen testing and you haven't looked at Laudanum, you definitely should. It's a set of exploit payloads. So when you find a place where you can upload a file to a server somewhere, and you're wondering, well, which file should I upload? Laudanum is the file you want to upload. There's PHP files, JSP, ASP, there's even Cold Fusion. And what they are is they create things like an interactive shell. So Laudanum by itself is it's a JavaScript-based interactive shell. So I decided, part of actually configuring and setting up Laudanum is a little bit complicated because we don't want attackers using our payloads out there, so you have to configure passwords on there, IP filtering. You want to make sure that somebody else doesn't find your exploit and start using it on you. So to do that, we created Laudanum. Laudanum for Burp, rather. And I've actually been involved in the original Laudanum project as well. So this was kind of fun to add on to here. So I have I've actually already generated a PHP shell and uploaded it just to a local server on here for demonstration purposes so I can show it. But if you haven't, then what you will do is configure it in this top section here, which is really straightforward. The token itself is just a random generated hex value. Restrict IP, so what you want to do is you want to put your externally facing IP. So what is the server going to see from you on there? Any other IP address that attempts to connect to that page is going to receive a 404. So they won't even know the page is there. So once you get that, now I have a kind of easy mode here as well, send to Laudanum. So I found my request to the shell. Going to send that over to Laudanum. And the way this works is, so this version of it, it's a different set of PHPs. Obviously not interacting through JavaScript now. I want to interact with just this page that's out there. So it's kind of like a RESTful web service. When you're ready to go, hopefully it works. Yep. So it's connected to it. It's received a response, and you have what looks like an interactive shell. So if I do like cat etc password, it actually works like that. So have a command injection in there. All right. That's it. That's all I have. So hopefully you enjoyed that. If you are interested at all in writing extensions and have any questions, please reach out to me. It's something I'm very passionate about, very excited about. So please let me know. Does anybody have any questions? CO2 is available on the App Store. That is not the most current version of it, though. So if you Actually, if you Google Burp CO2, you'll find it easily. And I have the one I was just showing here that includes laudanum is a beta, and it's free too. I do. It's on my list. Yes, I had several people say, "Well, can't you have like an interactive thing right on there so I don't have to go out?" And I agree. Yes, we should do that. So, any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much.